Before you go any further, pause for a moment. Not to analyze, not to judge, just to notice that you are here. Because moments like this do not arrive randomly. They arrive when something inside you has already begun to shift, quietly, almost imperceptibly, before the mind has words for it. You may have clicked on this without fully knowing why. Or perhaps you felt a subtle pull, a sense of recognition rather than curiosity. That matters. This is not a video you simply watch. It is an experience you move through. And what you are about to hear is not designed to convince you of anything, nor to give you something new to believe. It is designed to remind you of something you already know, but may have forgotten how to access. If this message is reaching you now, understand this clearly. It is not meant to repeat itself in the same way again. Not because the information will disappear, but because you will not be the same after receiving it. Frequencies do not repeat when consciousness has already moved. From this moment forward, you are invited to listen differently, not with effort, not with expectation, but with presence. There is a deeper intelligence beneath thought, one that recognizes truth before logic catches up. As this transmission unfolds, that intelligence is what will be addressed, not the part of you that tries to figure things out, but the part that remembers. You do not need to do anything special right now. You do not need to visualize, affirm, or force intention. Simply allow your attention to rest here. Because the core message you are about to encounter challenges one of the most deeply ingrained assumptions you may have carried for years, that you must chase what you desire, strive for alignment, or push reality into cooperation. What if that entire framework was inverted? What if the moment alignment occurs, effort becomes unnecessary, and desire begins to move toward you? That question will not be answered all at once. It will unfold gradually, layer by layer, as your awareness adjusts to a different orientation. For now, all that matters is this. You are here, and that is enough to begin. In the next part, we will establish a single essential commitment, not as a request, but as a signal that tells your own consciousness you are ready to stay present for what comes next. Before we go deeper, there is one subtle but important step that shifts this experience from passive listening into active alignment. Not because it helps the algorithm, not because it supports a channel, but because conscious choice changes how the mind and nervous system receive information. When you take a small intentional action, your brain registers something fundamental. I am participating, not observing. That distinction matters more than most people realize. If this message resonates with you, even slightly, consider subscribing now. Not as a habit, but as a signal to your own awareness that you are choosing continuity rather than distraction, that you are willing to stay with the process instead of drifting away the moment it challenges familiar patterns. If you feel it, allow yourself to press like, not to agree, but to amplify attention. Attention is energy. What you give attention to organizes itself differently within you. And if it feels right, type your name in the comments. Names are more than labels. They are anchors of identity. When you write your name, you are not calling something outside of you. You are calling yourself into coherence. None of this is required. There is no consequence if you don't. But there is a measurable shift when you do. Because commitment, even in its smallest form, tells the deeper layers of your consciousness. I am ready to remain present. And presence is the doorway through which alignment begins. In the next part, we will explore why you are not here by chance, and what it reveals about the role you are already playing in this unfolding process. There is a reason this message feels familiar, even if the words themselves are new. Most people move through life responding only to what is obvious, what demands attention, what creates urgency, what reinforces survival. But there are others who have always sensed something beneath the surface. A quiet awareness that reality is layered. That meaning is not random. That consciousness is not confined to the visible world. If you are here now, you belong to that second group, not because you are special in an egoic sense, but because you are sensitive to patterns, to energy, to shifts that cannot be explained neatly. You may have felt this since childhood, a sense of not fully belonging, of seeing through systems, roles, and expectations that others accept without question. Perhaps you learned early to dim this awareness in order to function, to fit, to survive. Or perhaps you tried to intellectualize it, searching for answers in knowledge, spirituality, or self-development. Either way, the signal never fully went away. What you are experiencing now is not a sudden awakening. It is a recognition. Recognition that your awareness has always been oriented slightly beyond the ordinary. Recognition that your discomfort with surface-level answers was never a flaw. Recognition that your attraction to ideas of consciousness, alignment, and deeper order was not escapism, but memory. You are not here because you were seeking entertainment. You are here because something in you responds to resonance. In many traditions, this orientation is described in different ways: starseed, light-bearer, observer, witness. Labels are not important. What matters is the function. These are individuals whose nervous systems and perception are naturally attuned to subtle information: timing, synchronicity, coherence. This attunement often comes with confusion, with periods of doubt, with the sense that you are waiting for something you cannot define, not because you lack direction, but because direction has not yet aligned with expression. That waiting ends when recognition occurs, and recognition does not come from being told who you are. It comes from feeling seen by something that speaks past the mind. If this resonates, understand this carefully. You are not being chosen by an external force. You are responding to an internal call that has been active far longer than this moment. This is why force has never worked for you the way it seems to work for others. Why chasing outcomes leaves you drained. Why motivation based on fear or pressure collapses quickly. Your system is not designed for pursuit. It is designed for alignment. And alignment begins not with action, but with awareness. In the next part, we will name the frequency that alignment operates within, and why once you enter it, the rules you've lived by begin to reverse. To understand what changes when alignment occurs, we need to name the field in which alignment actually operates. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but experientially. What many traditions refer to symbolically as the emerald frequency is not a color, a vision, or an abstract energy floating somewhere outside of you. It is a state of coherence, a measurable condition in which your mental focus, emotional tone, physiological state, and intention begin to move in the same direction. Most human effort is fragmented. Thought pulls one way, emotion pulls another. The body resists. Desire becomes strained. In that state, manifestation feels like work because it is work. You are attempting to override internal contradiction with willpower. The emerald frequency is what emerges when that contradiction dissolves. It is the moment your system stops leaking energy through resistance. When coherence replaces conflict, something subtle but decisive happens. Your attention stabilizes. Your nervous system relaxes without collapsing. Your awareness widens without losing clarity. This is the condition in which reality begins to respond differently, not because you demand it to, but because your signal becomes clean. This is why alignment is often misunderstood. People assume it is about positive thinking, visualization, or emotional intensity. But those are surface behaviors. Alignment is not something you do. It is something that occurs when interference drops away. The emerald frequency is the name given to that interference-free state. In this state, desire no longer feels urgent. Intention no longer feels desperate. Time no longer feels like an enemy, and this is critical. When urgency disappears, attraction strengthens. Why? Because urgency is a signal of lack, and lack creates noise. Noise scrambles, resonance. When the noise quiets, your internal signal becomes precise. Clear signals travel far. They do not need to shout. This is why individuals who operate in alignment often appear calm, even when their lives are changing rapidly. Their system is not chasing outcomes. It is broadcasting coherence. The emerald frequency is not something you turn on once and keep forever. It is a dynamic state you enter when attention, emotion, and meaning are no longer at war. At first, it may come in moments, during stillness, during deep focus, during presence. Over time, those moments lengthen. And as they do, the orientation of effort reverses. Instead of asking, "How do I make this happen?" the question becomes, what disrupts coherence right now? Because when coherence is maintained, action becomes efficient. Opportunities appear without force. Information arrives without strain. People, resources, and timing begin to converge in ways that feel improbably precise. This is not because the universe has suddenly noticed you. It is because you have stopped distorting your own signal. In the next part, we will examine what happens when this coherence becomes stable and why, at that point, desire no longer moves away from you but begins to move toward you on its own. Most people have been taught, explicitly or implicitly, that desire is something to pursue, that if you want something badly enough, you must move toward it with intensity, repetition, and effort. This belief is so normalized that few ever question it. But notice what pursuit actually creates inside the body. Tension, urgency, a narrowing of attention. Chasing desire places you in a perpetual state of not yet, and the nervous system interprets not yet as lack. Even when motivation feels high, the underlying signal is deficiency. This is where the reversal begins. When coherence stabilizes, when thought, emotion, and presence are no longer pulling in different directions, desire changes its behavior. It no longer feels distant or conditional. It no longer triggers anxiety or impatience. It becomes quiet, clear, and strangely neutral. This neutrality is often misunderstood. People mistake it for indifference and assume something is wrong. In reality, it is the moment desire stops leaking energy through grasping, and that is precisely when attraction activates. Desire does not respond to effort. It responds to resonance. When your internal state matches the structural qualities of what you seek, clarity, stability, openness, the system no longer needs to compensate. The signal is complete, and complete signals generate response. This is why forcing outcomes has never worked consistently for you. Not because you lacked discipline or strategy, but because your system is not designed to operate from pressure. Pressure collapses sensitivity, and sensitivity is your advantage. When pressure drops, something subtle shifts in perception. You stop scanning for results. You stop measuring progress compulsively. Time loosens its grip. In that space, desire begins to move, not dramatically, not explosively, but with inevitability. Like gravity. You don't feel gravity pulling until you stop resisting it. This is also why alignment can feel disorienting at first. The familiar tools, pushing, striving, visualizing harder, no longer produce feedback. The system asks something different of you: restraint, precision, trust in coherence. And trust, for a system accustomed to effort, feels like vulnerability. But this vulnerability is not weakness. It is sensitivity returning to its natural function. When desire begins to move toward you, it rarely announces itself. It arrives as timing that makes sense only in hindsight, as conversations that open doors without trying, as impulses that feel obvious only after they work. This is not magic. It is mechanics operating without interference. In the next part, we will explore how these movements are often labeled coincidence, and why, in an aligned system, coincidence is simply pattern recognition catching up to reality. As desire stops being pursued and begins to move on its own, a new phenomenon becomes difficult to ignore. Patterns appear. You think of someone, and they contact you. You arrive somewhere at precisely the right moment. You encounter information that answers a question you never spoke aloud. At first, the mind tries to dismiss these events as coincidence. That response is understandable. Coincidence is the label we use when pattern recognition exceeds our current explanatory model. But notice something important. These coincidences do not occur randomly. They cluster, they repeat, they follow a rhythm, and rhythm implies structure. When coherence is present, your awareness becomes more sensitive to timing, not in a predictive sense, but in a receptive one. You begin to notice relationships between events that were always there but previously drowned out by mental noise. This is what synchronicity actually is. Not the universe sending you signs, but your perception becoming organized enough to register alignment. The nervous system plays a central role here. In states of tension or urgency, perception narrows. The brain prioritizes threat and outcome. Subtle information is filtered out. But when coherence stabilizes, the system relaxes without losing alertness. In that state, awareness widens. You see more because you are no longer bracing. This widening creates the impression that reality has become more responsive. In truth, responsiveness was always present. What changed was your capacity to notice and participate in it. Numbers repeating on clocks. Encounters that feel meant to happen. Sequences that seem to guide rather than instruct. These are not messages imposed from outside. They are feedback loops. They show you where alignment is already operating. This is why synchronicities tend to increase after you stop forcing outcomes. Force collapses perception into linear cause and effect. Alignment restores access to relational awareness, how events speak to each other across time rather than through it. Importantly, synchronicity is not a guarantee of correctness. It is a signal of coherence, not destiny. It tells you your internal state and external environment are temporarily in conversation. And conversations require listening more than action. If you attempt to chase synchronicities, they dissolve. If you attempt to interpret them obsessively, they lose clarity. But when you remain present, they continue to appear, quietly confirming orientation rather than demanding belief. In the next part, we will look beneath these patterns to the principles that organize them and why ancient frameworks described this long before modern language had a way to explain it. When patterns begin to repeat, the rational mind often feels both relieved and unsettled. Relieved because something finally seems to make sense. Unsettled because it challenges the assumption that reality is chaotic, random, or indifferent. What you are encountering here is not belief. It is structure. Long before modern psychology or neuroscience attempted to describe coherence, ancient frameworks mapped the same dynamics using different language. These frameworks were not mystical in the way we often imagine today. They were observational. They described how consciousness organizes experience when interference is reduced. These observations were later summarized as principles, what are often called the Hermetic laws. not as rules imposed on reality, but as descriptions of how reality behaves when perception is clear. The first is the principle of mentalism, that experience arises through mind. This does not mean thoughts create reality in a simplistic sense. It means that the quality of attention shapes what becomes accessible. When attention is fragmented, experience fragments. When attention stabilizes, experience organizes. The second is correspondence. As within, so without. This is not metaphorical. Internal coherence produces external coherence because action, choice, and interpretation originate from the same system. When inner conflict decreases, outer friction follows. Then there is vibration. Everything that exists is in motion. But motion is not noise. It is information. Coherent systems emit stable patterns. Incoherent systems emit static. Reality responds to signal quality, not intensity. Polarity completes the picture. Apparent opposites, effort and ease, control and surrender, are not enemies. They are extremes of the same continuum. Alignment does not eliminate effort. It places effort where it is effective instead of compulsive. When these principles operate together, manifestation stops feeling mystical and starts feeling mechanical. Not cold or impersonal, but precise. This precision is what you may have been missing. You were not failing to manifest because you lacked desire. You were not blocked because you lacked worth. You were experiencing the natural consequence of operating within internal contradiction. The Hermetic frameworks did not offer techniques. They offered orientation. They taught that when orientation is correct, action becomes efficient and outcomes follow proportionally. This is why understanding these principles often brings relief rather than excitement. Relief comes from realizing that nothing is wrong with you. You were never broken. You were simply operating without a map, and maps matter when navigating complex terrain. As these principles integrate, not intellectually but experientially, you may notice a subtle shift. Less urgency, less compulsion to do something, more sensitivity to timing, more trust in restraint. This is not passivity. It is calibration. In the next part, we will move away from principles and toward guidance, not as an external authority, but as an intelligence that becomes accessible when coherence deepens and noise falls away. As coherence deepens and principles become lived rather than understood, something else begins to surface. Not information, not instruction, but guidance. This guidance does not arrive as a voice telling you what to do. It does not argue, persuade, or demand belief. It feels quieter than thought and clearer than emotion. It arrives as a knowing that does not need justification. Many traditions have given this intelligence a name. One of the oldest is Sophia, not as a figure to worship, but as a symbol for embodied wisdom. The aspect of consciousness that understands through integration rather than analysis. Sophia is not external to you. She does not intervene. She does not reward or punish. She does not override choice. She becomes perceptible only when interference drops low enough for subtle signals to register. This is why guidance cannot be accessed through force. The more you demand answers, the louder the mind becomes. And the louder the mind becomes, the less you can hear what operates beneath it. When coherence is present, guidance expresses itself differently. As timing that feels obvious, as restraint that feels intelligent, as impulses that are simple, precise, and oddly calm. You may notice this as a shift in how decisions form. Instead of deliberating endlessly, you sense when something is aligned and when it is not, without needing reasons. This is not intuition as impulse. It is intuition as integration. Importantly, this guidance never flatters the ego. It does not tell you you are superior. It does not promise shortcuts. It does not create dependency. It invites responsibility. Responsibility to listen before acting. Responsibility to pause before pushing. Responsibility to maintain coherence when distraction would be easier. This is why wisdom has always been associated with the feminine principle, not as gender but as function. Receptive, integrative, relational, not passive but responsive. When Sophia becomes accessible, effort changes quality. Action still happens. Choices are still made. But they arise from alignment rather than urgency. And when action arises from alignment, it does not fragment you. In the next part, we will bring everything together: coherence, desire, pattern, and guidance, and translate them into practical integration. Not techniques to apply, but lessons that stabilize this state so it does not collapse the moment life applies pressure. At this point, it becomes clear that alignment is not a single realization. It is a state that must be integrated, not maintained through effort, but stabilized through understanding. Without integration, coherence appears briefly and disappears under pressure. With integration, it becomes resilient. There are 3 lessons that anchor this state, not as rules to follow, but as orientations that prevent collapse when life becomes complex. The first lesson is this: manifestation is not an action, it is a condition. When people struggle, they usually add more techniques, more visualization, more intention, more repetition. But effort layered on misalignment only amplifies noise. The question that actually matters is not, what should I do next? But what state am I operating from right now? When the state is coherent, action becomes obvious. When the state is incoherent, no action works consistently. Learning to prioritize state over strategy is the first stabilizer. The second lesson is often resisted, even by those who understand it intellectually. Self-relation determines resonance. Self-love here is not sentiment, it is regulation. It is how you speak internally when nothing is working. It is whether your system experiences safety or threat in moments of uncertainty. A nervous system that feels attacked by self-criticism, comparison, or pressure cannot sustain coherence. Alignment collapses not because you failed spiritually, but because your system entered defense. This is why practices like mindful breathing, stillness, and conscious pause are not optional. They are not rituals. They are mechanisms of regulation. They keep the system open enough for guidance, timing, and perception to function. The third lesson is subtle and often misunderstood. Clarity reduces effort, but it increases responsibility. When alignment stabilizes, you lose certain excuses. You can no longer pretend you didn't feel the misalignment before saying yes. You can no longer ignore signals without consequence. Sensitivity increases. Precision is required. This is where many people unconsciously retreat. Alignment removes drama, but it also removes confusion. And confusion can be comforting. It delays choice. Integration means accepting that when coherence is present, delay becomes a decision. These 3 lessons work together. State first, regulation always, responsibility without pressure. When they are integrated, something important happens. Alignment stops feeling fragile. You no longer worry about losing it. You recognize misalignment early, correct gently, and continue without collapse. This is when manifestation becomes consistent, not spectacular, but reliable. Less fireworks. More accuracy. You stop asking whether something is meant for you and start noticing whether your system expands or contracts in its presence. You stop interpreting signs and start responding to feedback. You stop chasing confirmation and begin trusting calibration. At this stage, desire no longer distracts you. It informs you. Desire becomes data, not about what you lack, but about what your system is ready to engage. And when desire functions as information rather than fixation, it naturally aligns with growth rather than escape. This is the point at which alignment ceases to be an experience and becomes a way of operating. In the final part, we will close this transmission, not by ending the process, but by anchoring it, so that what has unfolded here does not remain an idea, but continues as a living orientation you carry forward, quietly and consistently, into what comes next. Take a moment now, not to think, but to notice. Notice your breathing. Notice the space behind your thoughts. Notice the absence of urgency. What has unfolded here is not something you need to hold on to. It is not fragile. It does not require protection or repetition. What you've touched is an orientation, one that becomes more stable the less you try to preserve it. From this point forward, alignment is not something you search for. It is something you recognize. You will notice it when effort feels clean instead of heavy, when timing feels supportive instead of rushed, when desire informs rather than distracts. And when misalignment appears, as it inevitably will, you will not need to dramatize it. You will sense it early, adjust gently, and continue. That is coherence in motion. If this transmission has resonated with you and you want to continue exploring this way of operating, not as belief, but as lived experience, I invite you to stay connected. Subscribing to this channel is not about receiving more content. It is about continuity. These explorations build on each other. Each one deepens perception, refines sensitivity, and strengthens integration. Staying connected simply means you don't have to start from zero each time. If you feel called, press like, not as approval, but as acknowledgement. Attention completes the circuit. It tells the system this orientation matters. And if you wish, share where you are listening from. Location grounds experience. It reminds us that coherence is not abstract. It lives in real bodies, real places, real moments. Most importantly, remember this: nothing you experienced here came from outside you. No frequency was given. No power was activated. What unfolded was a remembering, a reorganization of what was already present. Alignment does not make you extraordinary. It makes you precise. And precision is what allows life to meet you halfway. Carry this forward quietly. Let it express itself through timing, restraint, clarity, and choice. You do not need to announce it. Those who are attuned will recognize it without explanation. This is not an ending. It is a stable beginning. And wherever you are listening from, allow this moment to mark a shift. Not dramatic, not visible to others, but unmistakable to you.